It's never a dull moment when it comes to Xbox. There's the Wukong drama of whether it was money hatted or the developers simply didn't want to release it or making excuses, even though the developers openly said, we just don't have the experience needed to make this work on this platform. We've only made one game. This is our first game. Then you have, of course, the continued debate of whether analysts are coming in with the whole slate is going and PlayStation fans running rampant with the whole slate is going, and this debate will never end, and honestly it's getting quite boring. They keep repeating the same thing over and over and over again, and all I can say is whatever, because at the end of the day I'm getting it day one as part of my subscription on Game Pass, and I am saving a shed load of money. And you know what? I'm still playing the best version of the game, because if I'm not playing it on my Series X, I'm playing it on my 3090 Ti graphics card, and that is pretty much better than anything that the consoles have out there right now this second. So, regardless of how you look at it, we're eating good. If you're on the Series X, you're getting the games day one on Game Pass, so I don't see the real commotion here. But, quite some time ago, years ago in fact, a lot of information came out about how Dreamcast once upon a time, or Sega as I should say, when they exited the market, they blamed PlayStation for it, and no one really believed them and said that Sega were the ones that kind of deleted themselves from the industry. But that seems to be not so true anymore, because we've actually got a little excerpt here, as you can see on screen. But we've actually got a little bit of an excerpt here that kind of challenges that. And this is actually quite big. But first, let's have the drop. So, as you can see, two thoughts on fan-made Dreamcast port of GTA 3 steals the show. And apparently, GTA 3 would have been released on the Dreamcast, but Sony didn't allow it. In fact, as one developer here says, I was a developer when the PS2 and Dreamcast were getting started. Sony refused to give any PS2 dev kits to any game studio that had Dreamcast kits and were making Dreamcast games. We had to shelve our Dreamcast games so that we could get access to PS2 dev kits. The Dreamcast was the better system. Now this actually is really important, because big publishers like EA pulled out from the Dreamcast quite early on, and this actually now makes a lot more sense. Of course, this could all be fabricated, there is no proof of this, but this actually is the missing cogwheel that was missing for it all to make sense, because publishers fell out with the Dreamcast one by one, and it didn't make sense because it was a great machine. And it was a very powerful machine. But they just stopped developing for it. And this now kind of makes a lot more sense. And it does bring up the question, is Sony playing the same tricks now? Are they doing what they did during the PS2 era for Sega, now with the PS5 to Xbox? Because, as you can see from this image, they actually have it working. It's just an image, mind you, and the game doesn't perform great, but it does look pretty much as good as the PS2 version did at the time. So there was a there was a Dreamcast version in the works, but Rockstar apparently had to make a decision between making it only for the Dreamcast or only for the PS2, and PS2 in the end was a more popular machine and ended up winning the popularity contest. It's a real shame, because in the end, these are some scummy tactics, but it's a real shame. But the missing jigsaw piece that was always bothering me as to why did all these companies opt to leave the Sega platform? What was the reason? Even Valve with their Half-Life game, they finished developing it, they pretty much went gold, and then decided not to release it. And that was the final nail in the coffin for a lot of people, and that's when the end really came into place. But it is really, really interesting now to actually put it all together and see that despite all the discussions and rumors and, you know, people saying that it had nothing to do with PlayStation and Sega basically destroyed themselves. The reality of the fact is, if this statement is to be true and is to be believed, Sony were behind it. It's the reason why, you know, games like Tony Hawk's 3 and 4 didn't make it to Dreamcast but were on PlayStation. It's a real shame. Real shame. But those are the scummy practices that PlayStation employs in order to become market leader. They did at the time buy Psygnosis, who owned 40% of the gaming market, and no one batted an eye because no one cared. It was PlayStation. It's weird. And then ABK comes along and then everyone loses their mind. But, you know, one rule for one rule for another. But it's really sad to know that if, you know, I actually do believe that this is true regarding the whole Sega saga. And it's sad to see that Sony actually did force them out of the market in really scummy ways. And the reality is, we're talking about PlayStation here, so I'm more inclined to believe that this is true than not true, just based on their past actions and the way they conduct themselves and handle themselves. But you know what? It looks like maybe even they, as time goes on, are willing to change. Because, you know, they say you can't treat an old dog new tricks, but apparently you actually can, as now PlayStation will decide which games to release on multiple platforms, including other consoles, on a case-by-case basis. This comes courtesy of co-CEO Herman Holst. Now this 4 years ago was unthinkable. Single player games were exclusive only to PlayStation, and the only way to play them was on PlayStation. That soon changed to PC as well, and then they said Day and Date would never be on anything but PlayStation, and that soon changed as well to PC, and now the Switch. So as you can see, that case-by-case basis is expanding more and more as they look to make a return on their investment, because clearly whatever's happening over at Camp Sony, the retail sales just aren't enough. Otherwise, why would they actually expand to other markets? If they don't need the revenue, why do it? It doesn't make any sense. But Day and Date is becoming more and more of a thing, but really, is anyone really surprised? Of course, Sony also backed that up by saying there's no major risk of players choosing PlayStation gaming over a PS5, even if the PS5 Pro is $700 and the base console got a price hike in some regions. Now this is interesting because when you think about it, really, they don't fear people going to other platforms. They know that people's loyalty to the brand is strong enough that even if they did release Day and Date on other platforms, people would still buy that PlayStation for $700, $800, $900, $1,000. It really doesn't matter what they price it at. As long as it has that PlayStation logo, they will buy it. And, you know, the Portal is a prime example of this. But, moving on. But like I said at the start of the video, gaming news right now, at least until the Xbox Developer Direct and CES, is really slow. You've got Tony Palanco over here saying, gaming Twitter is about to go nuclear. Get your popcorn ready, as a analyst says Microsoft may, possibly, could be, potentially, might, or any other adjective that basically is a 50-50 adjective that basically has nothing to put behind their name, all their big games to PS5. When will a journalist actually come out, or an analyst come out, and put their name on the line and say 100% this is going to happen? I mean, it may happen, it may not happen, right? But the reality is, until that title says Microsoft is 100% bringing all their big games, it's just fake news, and it's just wind in the air. It's just ways for them to try and get themselves a little bit of street cred, and they're looking at ways to clickbait and rile up the industry. What can I say? Shadows. But of course, the one rumor that never seems to go away is the one you're seeing on screen right now. The rumor of all rumors that's been a rumor for what, a year, maybe more now, that all the Spider-Man games, including Wolverine and Deadpool, are going to come to Xbox via back compatibility and be available on Xbox. Now this doesn't include the Insomniac games, but this rumor has been going around for quite some time, and who knows, maybe one day, this will actually be a thing. But folks, that's pretty much all the news we have today. It does seem like Sony did in fact actually, force Sega out of the industry, that if they make a game for the Dreamcast, they can't get a PS2 dev kit. How was this even allowed to go on? Why didn't the industry at that point turn around and say, well, okay then, we'll make all our games exclusive to the Dreamcast and move forward? It really does shock me how the industry has been playing and pandering to PlayStation since the days of the PS2. And don't get me wrong, the PlayStation 2 was a phenomenal machine. It sold 160 million units. It speaks for itself. But now the way it actually got there does raise questions. And to me, at the very least, the PS2 now has lost some respect. Because it didn't get there by its own merit. It got there through, as Phil Spencer says, slimy tactics. And that just doesn't sit well with me. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, folks, and let's have that discussion, and I'll see you in the next one. As always, remain legend.